Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our third of 4 webinars on human resources. I'm very pleased to welcome Patrice Green, a human resource consultant. This is our next webinar that's been sponsored by CMTC and the Grow Manufacturing Initiative. If you have any questions, feel free to throw them in the Q&A or in the chat box, and I'll make sure to check that at the end, and we'll field any questions you have. I'll pass it over to Patrice now. Thank you.
Welcome, everybody. My name is Patrice Green, and today we're going to be talking about the impact of COVID-19 on hiring and retention. And we're also going to be talking about onboarding for success and productivity. So the impact of COVID-19 has had various effects on the manufacturing industry. It promises to have both long and short-term effects in the different modes of work. And for some time, it's been unclear as to whether working from home will continue or how widespread it will be, because working from home is not for every industry. It's not for every employer. It really kind of depends upon how that particular work environment is set up, and can it transition into a work at home situation. Manufacturing is one of those areas where that's still a question mark. Not all positions in manufacturing can be transitioned to working from home, and then how do you balance that out? When employees do continue working from home, that may have unexpected effects on the work culture, ancillary effects on the employee's retention, because working from home is not easy. Some people think that it is, but it's not. It's a balancing act. You may have children at home that you have to balance your work time with, and employers still want you to put in a full day's work. Even though you're working from home, unless you've made different arrangements. So working from home is a balancing act, and a lot of employers are finding it difficult to maintain that balance and get the productivity that they want. And on the other hand, the persistence of work from home, it could create opportunities for recruiting, because just like there are organizations that are not embracing that, there are organizations who have embraced it, have recruited for it, and have kind of transitioned their business into working from home, where no one's in the office and everybody is in a home office. And the working from home could be positioned as a perk for hard to retain employees, and companies could cast their recruiting nets wider to attract employees from outside their geographies. So when you working from home offers you the opportunity, if there's a talented person, if you're in California and you find a very talented person, maybe that does not live in the geographic area, but maybe they live in a different area throughout California, or maybe in a different state, working from home allows an employer to, hire that person and get the top talent that they're looking for, versus, if they don't find it in their local geographic area, they're kind of stuck with what they have. So you get a wider and a broader net of candidates for your positions when you offer work at home. And those are some of the things that the pandemic has really brought about, because telecommuting has, always been a question mark, and not a lot of companies have, prior to the pandemic, not a lot of companies embraced the telecommuting industry or the telecommuting work environment. It really kind of depended upon what kind of work you're doing, and that kind of drove whether or not it could be done remotely. But the COVID-19 pandemic has forced companies, in order for them to be able to stay open and consider the safety and welfare of their employees, remote working has become very important and be able to achieve their goals. So recruiting and retention strategies, they were already changing prior to COVID-19. And then COVID-19, it transformed the economy, and it introduced profound changes and uncertainty in the work environment. And then now, as the economy begins to stabilize and recover, manufacturers must creatively structure their compensation plans and find ways to win the battle for increasingly valuable workers who can drive success. So essentially what that means is that prior to COVID-19, we were faced with an aging workforce. We were faced with a skills gap that was beginning to occur or has been occurring within the manufacturing industry. And then COVID-19, the pandemic, has only made that more visible and has made it a little bit more complicated. And it's caused employers to have to be creative in their recruiting strategies, how they recruit talent, how that talent works, what type of environment, because we not only is our workforce aging, but we have younger workers coming in, and their priorities are different than the priorities of the aging workforce that's migrating out. And so meeting those expectations of a younger workforce makes it difficult because the manufacturer has have a good reputation. Um, Manufacturing traditionally isn't looked upon as the best work among the younger generation, among millennials, Gen 2020ers, and some Gen Xers. They haven't looked at manufacturing as an option, but now you need to be able to recruit that talent, and so therefore you have to consider what it is they're looking for in an employer of choice. There are 5 strategies out there that can help manufacturers address the complexities of recruiting and retention in 2021. Um, Holistic compensation with benefits for wage workers. You know, we went through a period of time where, there was a time where, there was a shortage, and it's kind of cyclical, and we're in that cycle again. And then there was a time when it was an employer's market when it came to recruiting and talent, and it was plentiful. You had choices. And now we're in the pandemic, and there are a lot of people out there. The difference is what makes them happy, what makes them want to stay with your company. Employer branding has become very, very even more important since COVID-19 than it has been in the past. Um, Many employers have not necessarily embraced employer branding to be able to attract candidates, and one of those things is compensation. So a lot of people are looking and feel that they're worth what they're worth, and so they're looking for different compensation packages with their new employer that kind of benefits them as they move forward with their career opportunities. So holistic compensation with benefits for wage workers, it's a mix of components. It includes your base salary, your annual incentives, any long-term incentives will also be crucial to having a competitive compensation package. And many believe benefits are going to be incredibly important when you think about hourly workers. And that hasn't necessarily been the case in the past, but due to the COVID-19, due to the complexities that it's caused this workforce to really rethink what's important to them in their next employer or their future employer. They sometimes fall into a not so sweet spot for making enough money to get by, but benefits aren't necessarily provided. There are some people out there that will just look at how much money they get, and maybe they don't want benefits, but that's changing. This new workforce that we're dealing with, they want benefits. They want a good salary. They want benefits where they can provide health coverage for their families and for themselves. So a portion of their income is they don't have a problem paying for that portion of the income. So it's going to be challenging for an employer to balance that out because some small businesses, small manufacturers, that can be a numbers crunch for them, and they may have to pay more into their benefits. But this new generation is really not too worried about that. They're more so worried about having the availability of benefits. The economic shocks of 2020, especially coming from a decade of growth, are causing manufacturers to consider recalibrating the bonus programs to avoid disruptions. People depend upon their bonuses, and a lot of times bonuses are what keep people working for particular companies. Some people work for that annual bonus. So when you start to recalibrate that bonus, they and they don't know if it's going to be better for them or worse for them, people start to rethink, okay, well, maybe I need to start to look for a different employer, because it just depends upon what those bonuses are, how much they mean to your team, and how often they're paid out. Some strategies can help shore up the retention, because you want to retain employees, because you want to retain the experience level that they have. You have your aging workforce that's migrating out. You have this new workforce coming in that not be as experienced, and you want to try to, balance that out and create a cross training, so that as people go out, you still have experienced people on board. So it's important that we think about those bonuses, and as an employer, and remember how important those bonuses are to your staff, because that can be very critical in whether or not they stay with you over a long period of time. Segmentation is another way. In the face of uncertainty and in limited resources, a one-size-fits-all strategy often it doesn't work. You have to think about the different type of people you have working for you, and giving everybody everything. That's not realistic either, because that can be financially crippling for a small manufacturer. But you can segment it out. You can, based on their position, they can get XYZ benefits. Um, you can figure out a way to where you can segment it out so that it's not so cost intensive for the organization. But people, this workforce is very much concerned about the workplace safety. Are they going to be safe at work? They're looking at what's in it for me. The attitude of the workforce versus the baby boomers and the traditionalists who would come to work, and regardless what happened, they want to stay with that employer until they retire. Those people are retiring right now, and you have a new generation of people coming in, and their priorities are completely different. So segmentation can be a way that you can maintain your retention, and it can also be a way for you to attract top talent. Career path development. A lot of companies do have succession plans, so that their employees could kind of move up the ladder and get better paying positions and get better positions. But some companies haven't really embraced the career pathing methodology. And so they have position, they don't necessarily take an employee unless that employee takes the initiative to do their own career path, and they see those opportunities within the organization. Then those people tend to move up. But some people don't necessarily know how to do that. And so when you have a good career path program where everybody understands that this is where they're starting, and these are the opportunities within the organization, and how does the organization promote from within? What does an employee have to do to get promoted? Do they have to take some extra training? Does the employer provide that training, or do they provide some sort of compensation or educational compensation, so that those employees can get trained, so that they can step up into these different positions? But career pathing and succession planning are going to become very, very important when it comes to attracting top talent and bringing them in, because people are looking for what that organization is going to do for them. But you can't do everything, and you can't offer everything to everybody. But if you can lay the foundation for career pathing within the organization and how they can achieve that, that will go a long way into retaining and attracting new top talent. Because top talent, they are looking for longevity, but they're also looking for uh, some sort of benefit. They're looking for opportunities for growth. And sometimes manufacturers don't necessarily make those things a priority, because because of the nature of the manufacturing environment. But to be able to attract that top talent, especially with the skill gap, um, that this career pathing can be very profitable or very beneficial to a small manufacturer. Automation, I think we all know about automation. Automation isn't a typical retention strategy, but it can ease both recruitment and retention concerns. Um, one of the things that hurts manufacturing is the perception that the assembly line, the environment that people kind of put in their minds exists in manufacturing, and that has really changed with the onset of robotics and automation. The manufacturing environment continues to change. It needs a more skilled worker to be able to manage the automation and the robotics part of the business, and so it's not necessarily you're going to need to bring in people that have uh, a knowledge base to be able to do that. So how do you do that? But one thing to remember, automation and robotics do attract top talent. It's they're into the computer, they're into robotics, they're into automation, and being able to be a part of that does attract top talent to your organization. So, considering automation, how does it impact your particular company? How much of it are you going to be able to embrace and bring in? That's going to make a big difference on how you recruit and what people are going to think of your company. And that has a lot to do with branding and the way you brand the environment and the way you let people know why you are the employer of choice. And it's time to remember that it's a people business because I think, with technology, we've kind of gotten away from that. And we kind of realize that, through technology, we can get more done with less people. But what COVID-19 is kind of showing us is that it is a people business. And regardless to how many people you do employ, how you take care of those people, it's going to go a long way. It's going to go a long way for your reputation. Do you, as a manufacturer, care about the welfare and safety of your employees, and how do you exhibit that to them? COVID-19, along with a multi-generational workforce, has brought to light the need to invest in your people more, especially when it comes to education, working more with colleges to bring in that talent, networking and creating partnerships within the community to be able to identify that top talent. And companies that take this initiative using creative ways to make employees feel and understand their worth to an organization will successfully navigate recruiting and retention challenges through the post COVID-19 era. So what you do now will have an impact for years to come. And I think that remembering it's a people business, and I know that sometimes that means additional costs, but it can be balanced. And you know what? Different environments have different incentives, and their people are attracted to those incentives. And so it's kind of being creative, looking at your environment and what would attract a person to want to come to work for you, or what is it that you need to do to be able to attract that top talent? There are some companies out there that attract a certain caliber of employee. That has a lot to do with their reputation. um, Sometimes it's difficult for one manufacturer to hire people, and it's easy for another manufacturer to hire people. And the difference is the branding and the employer brand that's out there. And you have to, in this day and time and during this era of COVID-19, employer branding and what you do for your employees and the priority you place on your employees makes a tremendous difference on if people want to come to work for you or not. So we're going to continue to talk about branding. So for many people, the perception of manufacturing we talked about is unappealing. Perhaps even more concerning are the observations from Seema Pujala. She's the vice president or vice chairman of the and U.S. Industries and Insights leader for Deloitte. And based on the research they've done, she stated that prospective younger employees view manufacturing as boring, outdated, and not creative. The survey also showed 45% of the respondents cited a negative perception towards the manufacturing industry as a cause for projected job vacancies. So it can become, if you don't have that employer brand out there, and as a recruiter, I've experienced that. If that brand is not out there, if people don't know who you are, if they don't know that you take care of your employees, you want people talking about your business, not just from the aspect of what you produce, but from the people side. Because people talk, and when they have a bad experience with a company, that gets around. When they have a good experience with the company, that gets around. The potential economic impact of this is enormous, with unfilled positions expected to create productivity losses up to 2.5 trillion by 2028, according to Deloitte. Companies must come together with industry bodies to become more attractive to women and younger people. You have to improve that employer brand towards your organization or towards manufacturing in general, so that people begin to understand what manufacturing has to offer. What are the promotional opportunities? What are the career paths available in manufacturing? Can come to work and stay with an organization for an extended period of time and be able to grow and mature and move on to higher positions? What does your organization offer? And does anybody know that you offer that? That's important. Your brand is going to become critical. It was already critical prior to COVID-19 because these shortages have been predicted, for the past several years. But because of COVID-19, people have, your employees have looked at how you as an employer have taken care of them through this pandemic. Were you flexible with them through the pandemic? Did you, or were you able to meet their needs through the pandemic? And that's going to have a determination on whether they stay with you past the pandemic, or are they going to look for employment elsewhere? So we have to really look at this employer branding with a lot more detail and attention, because it's going to affect your ability to recruit top talent. Manufacturers' main concerns about the availability and quality of workers, it's huge, especially in manufacturing. Manufacturers are worried about labor-related challenges that predated the pandemic and that would still be there after the pandemic, and that's the reality. Some of these problems existed before the pandemic. The pandemic only exacerbated it, and made the skill gap wider more quickly. And while holding tight to their best people, some manufacturers express a frustration about an aging workforce that may have grown comfortable with the status quo during the decade long of the economic boom. So your aging workforce, they may not necessarily see sharing their skills and expertise with a younger peer appealing. It may not be appealing to them, but it's going to be important that you create multi-generational teams within your organization so that you can transfer that skill gap. And then for automation and robotics, some things you can consider is the top talent that you have employed right now, the people that you'd like to retain right now, um, helping them with the educational assistance they're going to need, so that they can go back to school and they can get that skill to manage within a highly robotic or highly automated manufacturing environment. So there are some ways to do it. You just have to be creative. You have to, and you have to be creative and think about how you can do it with the least amount of impact financially to your organization. And they also feel that workers aren't eager to embrace the new requirements for companies to continue to compete. Companies are evolving. You have some companies that are further along in bringing on automation than other companies. But you also have an aging workforce that's used to doing it themselves. They're used to using their hands to get things done. And so robotics and automation may not be something they want to migrate to. It may not be something that they really want to learn. And so we have to ensure that our employees change management becomes important, so our employees understand the importance of understanding and taking on and being able to do the new requirements that the manufacturing industry is going to require. The blue collar drought. Despite the rise in the number of people looking for work, skill shortages will continue to be the challenge for manufacturing firms, because there will still be gaps between the compatibilities between the compatibility business need and what's available in the labor market. So a lot of people, they go to school, but are they going to school to learn what a manufacturer is going to need in this new workforce? Is this generation embracing manufacturing as an option? Um, are there more women? Do you have, is your workforce comprised of mostly men? So how do you attract women into an organization like that, and being creative and finding ways so that you can close the skill gap so that it has minimal impact? I don't think you could ever get away from the impact, but you can plan now for the future. You can use your multi-generational workforce work teams to transition skills to, so they can transition skills to each other. It's a matter of just being creative and figuring out a way to make it work for your particular organization. Businesses are struggling with the blue collar drought, with roles becoming increasingly technical and demanding, but fewer people are choosing to pursue an education and training in sectors like manufacturing. And COVID-19 has brought this issue more into the forefront, and several trends are increasing the scale of the skill gap. These include aging and retiring workforce and the impact of robotization and a tight labor market. So creativity will be key in overcoming and being able to overcome some of the challenges of a blue collar drought. The impact of automation and robotization. Historically, there's always been a fear that new technology will mean fewer jobs. The reality is that new technology often creates different types of opportunities. A study done by Deloitte in 2015 showed that over the preceding 144 years, technology has created more jobs than it's destroyed. But the perception out there is that technology has created less jobs, and the key is changing that perception within your community and having people to understand that through automation and robotization, there are more jobs available, but you have to have the skill set for those types of jobs, which means you have to work more with your community colleges to come up with programs to attract people who could be interested, or to attract people into the manufacturing industry. So working more with those community colleges and even with seniors in high school to help them to understand what manufacturing has to offer through automation and robotization will become critical. Another Deloitte Touche analysis highlighted that when used the right way, automation can achieve a positive impact on productivity, employee engagement, and customer value. One of those ways could be through a tablet. Automation and robotization, a lot of things are being done on a computer. So having that tablet, this generation of always having to be on their phones, you can use, they can use a tablet to get the job done in the workplace a lot faster. But, you need to have somebody who's familiar with that type of technology. And the use of automation and robotization should be central to modernizing the image of the manufacturing sector. In the future, you likely see the types and roles you recruit for change in manufacturing over time, and they're going to require a different skill set as technology advances. They're going to need to understand that technology. They're going to need to be able to work with that technology, and they're going to need to be educated in that technology. So working with those community colleges to attract people to get that education, so that they can come into the manufacturing industry that they now understand has lots of opportunities available to them, is going to be critical. An aging workforce. In the US, nearly a quarter of the manufacturing workforce is over the age of 55. While in the UK, manufacturing is one of 4 industries, along with health, retail, and education, that collectively accounts for nearly half of all the 50 plus workers in the economy. That's a lot of people. You're probably well aware that one of the reasons the sector is facing a shortage of workers is the high number of people who have recently retired or are approaching retirement age. People are working longer. There was a time where people would work 62, they're ready to retire, or they start looking at retirement options. But people are working longer now. You have people working well into their 70s. And that's a benefit to an employer, but you have to realize that at some point that person is going to retire, or their health may not allow them to continue to work. So you have to plan for that. So those cross-generational work teams become really critical, so that if that person leaves sooner rather than later, you still transferred the skills onto this younger generation. With many deaths due to COVID-19, the skill gap is more prevalent. Older workers should be viewed positively, with the Wall Street Journal reporting that in the Eurozone, workers aged 55 to 74 accounted for 85% of employment growth between 2012 and 2018, according to the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development. So you must make the most of an aging workforce and limit the loss of expertise and knowledge when experienced workers retire. I keep going back to it, those multi-generational work teams. The one thing, with your aging workforce, they tend to like to work alone, and they don't have a lot of patience for the younger workforce. And the younger workforce doesn't necessarily have a lot of patience for the aging workforce. But as employers, we have to be able to bridge that gap and bring these generations. For the first time, there are 5 generations of people in the workforce right now. You have traditionalists, you have your baby boomers, you have your Gen Xers, you have your millennials, and you have your Gen 2020s. So how do you take those 5 generations and bring them together and have them work together collectively, and productively within your environment, so that you can transfer that knowledge base over to the younger generation, so that as people begin to retire, or your skill gap is much smaller. And hiring and retention will continue to evolve. COVID-19 could roll everything in, from markets and revenues and to operations, and for the months to come. It's going to have an impact. Many manufacturers are worried about the rise of remote workers, and a lot of manufacturers are not embracing that. They don't feel that remote workers will work for their organization, and rightly so, because remote workers don't work for it doesn't work for every situation. And it's important to understand that everybody is not made for remote work. A lot of people think that they can work remotely, but it takes a lot of discipline. It takes time management, takes a lot of flexibility. And so you have 2 things kind of working against each other. One, you may have an environment that's not able to embrace the remote workforce environment, but then you may have employees that aren't able to be good remote workers. And that's a reality. It's not that remote working is bad, but it's not made for everybody. So how do you create a balance? The president and CEO of MarketBot's Industry, a maker of 3D printers in Brooklyn, said it's hard to maintain a culture remotely. There are a lot of employers out there that feel that their employees need to be in one place with supervisors and managers to ensure high productivity. And that may be very true for that particular environmental, employment culture. So a remote work may not be something that they can embrace, but it is an option. And if your environment can allow for it, it could help with retention. It could increase productivity, but it has to be the right situation and the right fit. Some COVID lessons. Manufacturers can leverage how they deal with their employees amid the pandemic. And that was stated by Brock Hare. He's the vice president and counsel for IEDC. The steps manufacturers are taking have created a competitive advantage for some companies. There's definitely an opportunity from how they leaned into best practices. So, what are your best practices? It's an opportunity to define new best practices, but it's going to be based upon your environment and what works for your environment. And then efforts to keep employees safe during the pandemic will pay future dividends. And that is so true. The way an employer looked at that and made their employees a priority and made keeping them safe a priority and ensured that when they were in the work environment that it was safe, they had their masks or they had their shields on, they were 6 feet apart. Employers that really took the time to make sure that their employees would be safe are going to reap benefits from years to come, because people are going to remember that. People in the community hear what companies have done to keep people safe, and also what they made through the PPE that will help us, to, keep using. If you were able to get the PPE, it can help you to attract more people because you were able to keep your current workforce employed. You didn't have to let them go. And so, how you treated employees through this? Did you lay them off? If so, how did you lay them off? How did you do it? It whatever it is that you did, it's going to impact your hiring and retention for years to come. We're going to go on to onboarding and orientation. So a lot of times people will take orientation and onboarding and lump them together, or they look at them to be the same thing, and they're really not the same thing. Onboarding is an ongoing process of establishing the employee within the organization. It's how they're, for lack of a better word, inducted. How do you bring them in? How are they treated when they start? Was it chaotic? Was it, confusing? Did they understand the processes? Were your managers involved? Did they have a mentor? I mean, there's so many different ways you can migrate an employee into the workforce, but that's onboarding. And orientation is a part of it, of the onboarding process, where new employees learn about the company and their job responsibilities. So orientation teaches them about the company and their onboarding, and what the policies and procedures are. And onboarding is how are they migrated into the workforce? Are they just thrown in there to just kind of, you know, thrown in there and kind of just get going, get their feet wet right away? Or are they, migrated in slowly? They do certain things week 1, week 2, week 3, so that they understand the flow. And do they have a mentor? A lot of companies are using mentors to take them through that onboarding process. The goal of onboarding is to create a willingness of the employees to work for the organization. And the goal of orientation is to familiarize the work environment and company culture with new employees. And both of these concepts are related to the recruitment process. So um, when we're recruiting, we will be using or talking about the company and helping to educate them about the company. And we'll be talking to them about the onboarding process before they're handed off to HR to experience both. So onboarding is a strategic process of bringing new employees to the organization and providing information, training, mentoring, and coaching throughout the transition. This process begins at the acceptance of an offer and throughout the first 6 to 12 months of employment. The onboarding process helps to build a good relationship between the new employer, his supervisor, and manager. And the main objectives of the onboarding process would be to facilitate the new employee's ability to contribute in the new role. It would be to increase the new employee's comfort level in the new role, to reinforce his or her decision to stay within the company, and to enhance productivity and to encourage towards being a committed employee and employee engagement. So orientation, to be more specific, they're focused on introducing uh, the company for newly recruited employees. It provides various details regarding company policies and procedures, culture, work environment, health and safety measures. So they basically give them the rules, the processes, and the procedures. And usually the Human Resources Department is responsible for conducting the orientation programs for the newly hired employees. So the orientation process is used to familiarize the new employee with the working conditions and to establish a favorable attitude about the company and to obtain effective output from the new employee in the shortest period possible and to retain employees within the organization. So it starts with orientation. The onboarding process is ongoing for the next, 6 to 12 months, meaning that you are making sure that this employee for their first year of employment, they have a good transition. They are being trained properly for what they've been hired to do. They get along with everybody. Um, that process right there becomes very, very important in being able to manage your retention. Um, there are a lot of companies that hire people and within into certain positions, and traditionally people leave that position within 6 to 12 months, and that you don't want. I mean, some companies embrace that, and that's, it's okay for, for them to have that type of workforce, but that can be very expensive because orientation, training, and onboarding can be an expensive process. So it's embracing that onboarding process and making sure that as they transition into the workforce over the next 6 to 12 months, the experience that they have with the organization, with the management team, with their coworkers. Is it a team environment or is it a competitive environment? Um, do they have options? Do they have opportunities for growth? Do they see those opportunities for growth? I mean, that's what onboarding is about. Orientation is about the immediate. This is ABC company. This is what we do. This is what we manufacture. These are our rules and policies. Do you acknowledge receipt of these rules and policies? That's the orientation piece. So onboarding employees who are well onboarded are 30% more likely to feel well integrated into their new place of work, 30 times more likely to experience high job satisfaction, and 18 times more likely to feel committed to their company. A well onboarded employee becomes a highly engaged employee, and companies with highly engaged workforces outperform their peers by 147% in earnings per share. Um, the process begins with onboarding. It begins with it begins with making sure that employee enjoys what they do with your company, making sure that employee is comfortable with what you have to offer them as far as promotional opportunities, what benefits are available. Do you have segmented benefits? Are you investing in your employees? That's the onboarding process. And it will pay benefits for years to come, and it will build your employer brand. We have a short window to impress new hires. And that is so true. People come in, and we've all heard the expression that first impressions are lasting. So how you treat them those first few days, more importantly, that first day, kind of determines, how long they're going to be with your organization. After just a week in a new company, 33% of new hires know whether they want to stay long term, or is this going to be a short visit. Almost 2/3 know whether their new role is a keeper after the first month. So, and that's where the onboarding process comes in. How are they, after 30 days, do they understand what the expectations are of the job that they're in the first 30 days, the 60-day mark and the 90-day mark? And how are they being trained to meet those marks? And how are they being trained to do it over time, over the next year? If onboarding and the resulting engagement rise is important to the average industry, then the consequences are magnified within manufacturing. Here, successful onboarding uh, is not only a matter of engagement or productivity, but also higher accidents, health, and safety factors. Because you have OSHA is important within the manufacturing industry, making sure that the equipment is safe, making sure the equipment is maintained, and that the employees can use it safely, making sure there are no safety issues within the manufacturing industry. There are so many different things that go on that floor, and making sure those things are taken care of, and that your employees feel like the employer will do or is taking care of them to make sure that they're safe, goes a long way in defining how long a person will work for you. So if there's a lot of risk in that environment, if there are things going on that affect the safety of the employee, then you have a high risk of high turnover. Employers in their first month are employees in their first month are 3 times more likely to incur a lost time injury. So adequate training, adequate on the job training, adequate mentoring is important, and proper onboarding negates a large part of that risk. An effective onboarding experience directly addresses some of the manufacturing sector's most existential pain post, from reducing high churn rates and overworked staff to a changing clock in and out culture. The onboarding process can help you discover how you can better engage and educate new hires from the moment they step onto the floor. And that is very important. They how you bring them on is how they stay. So if they're brought on and safety is important, and you're engaging them day one, you're teaching them day one, you're making them the priority, you're letting them know that their safety is most important. You're introducing them to safety policies and procedures to ensure they don't get hurt. You maintain the equipment. They can see that the people you have working for you are they like their job, or do they see a grumbling workforce? Do they see people complaining about how this doesn't work and that doesn't work? That onboarding piece and how they come in becomes very, very critical. But you can positively impact productivity or negatively impact productivity through the onboarding process. Reach out. Good first impressions start long before the new hire's first day on the job. In fact, employers and employees alike form beliefs about each other within seconds of meeting, analyzing everything from body language to voice pitch in the blink of an eye. And that is so true. What we see when we first get there and how we perceive it, a lot of it has to do with perception. So how they perceive your environment, how they receive it, what do they see? And, it's important for employers to really kind of step back and just take, every once in a while, and just take a look, an objective look at the environment, and really kind of start to determine what you see and how people are perceiving your work environment. talk to your employees on a regular basis. I'll never forget, I worked with a manufacturer of steel doors and windows. And the one thing he had, his employees stayed a long time, but the one thing that he did was he spoke to his employees every day. Every day he walked the floor, and if he didn't do anything else but say good morning, and find out how their day was going, he spent the first 30 minutes on the floor engaging his employees, identifying problems and concerns, but he let them know that they were a priority to him. And he didn't have high turnover. He had high productivity. He did not have a high turn and burn. And as he expanded his hours and he added that night shift, he was able to transition with committed people without having hiring and retention problems for that later shift. So how we engage our employees, how we reach out to them, how we talk to them becomes a very important piece of the onboarding process and the ongoing onboarding process. You want to make the most of your first impressions by having the employee's new manager reach out to them directly a few days before their first shift. Make a phone call. Have them make a phone call and, hi Jack, how you doing? My name is Patrice, and you're going to be working for me. And I just wanted to reach out and let you know that we're excited um, about you coming to work for us. We look forward to your first day. And do you have any questions? And maybe, and just spark that conversation. That makes a new employee, as they come into the organization, feel like you care. It makes them feel wanted. It makes them feel like what they're bringing to the table is valuable. And when they feel that way, then they have higher productivity, and they just kind of tend to, you know, maintain that good positive attitude, because once they come in, you continue to reach out, you continue, that over the next 6 to 12 months, you manage their experience that they have on the job. And so in the end, you have a retained employee who doesn't quit. Onboarding is crucial to the success of new or furloughed employees. Expect the future of onboarding to be multifaceted. Initial stages of onboarding will be virtual and cover the basics as well as the return to work movement that's occurring right now. We have a lot of people going back to work. There will be more onboarding. So as people come back to work, the work environment that they left may not be the work environment that they're coming back to. So onboarding them and educating them prior, why don't you just have them come in and they just kind of step in and get it done, or you can have an onboarding process that helps them to understand this new work environment, these new work expectations, and how it affects them. So a good change management program for the furloughed employees as they come back, and how you're going to have furloughed employees and new employees together in the orientation. So how they interact throughout the orientation becomes critical. What are your furloughed employees saying to people who've never worked for you before? Are they saying things that engage them and make them want to continue to work for you, or are they having a negative conversation? Long-term employees like returning to new hires will face a wide range of new office policies, procedures, and protocols due to COVID-19. Um, HR departments will be faced with issues that they may have never addressed before or had to address in the workplace before the pandemic, and should prepare, to do some things more virtually and in person, but making sure the right safety protocols are in place when it's in person. The workplace has forever changed, and the skills and security measures are going to continue to evolve. And so those security measures, you'll get things from the CDC, things that you're going to need to do within the workplace to ensure the safety of your employees. How you act upon that, how you implement those changes goes a long way into letting the employee know how you feel about their safety and their welfare. Using a lot of video conferencing and technology will become necessary for some industries. Um, so embracing, being more creative, finding ways to engage the employees so that they're comfortable and they understand. It's very much a people business. And, I think that some companies have gotten out of that over time. We use technology, and it's not as much as a people business, as more this is work. But we are entering into an era where your people are concerned about how you treat them. That's an important factor this day in this age with this new workforce, and how well you embrace that will go a long way with your onboarding process, your hiring, and your retention. You want to use the time between official job offers and the candidate start date to take care of documentation logistics. Consider sending several key HR documents to the candidates electronically, like tax forms, benefit registration forms, compliance documents, and role expectations and performance objectives. You want to maybe send that to them via email and have them either bring it on the first day of employment completed, or have them return it to you via email by designated date. But, taking care of some of that stuff beforehand can allow your orientation process to be more productive and allow the onboarding process to begin sooner. You can even expedite early training sessions by sending formal training pamphlets, documents, and tutorials, online tutorials prior to the hire's first shift. And you can have an employee e-portal that can provide information to them, and it allows the preemptive paperwork and logistics to be shared and saved conveniently between all parties. So if you allow them into your e-portal, they can save it the way your e-portal saves things, and you have all that documentation, which allows for more time to spend with the employee doing the onboarding process. You want to get the team involved. You want to have the new employees manager update all relevant team members about the incoming new employee, and colleagues will be better prepared for the new hire's first day. That is true, because I know that there's been a lot of times that new employees walk in and your people are busy, and they didn't even know that that new person was starting, so they don't necessarily engage that person. However, if you get everybody involved and they know that this new employee is starting, then it helps to make those first few days run a lot smoother. The same morning, ask everyone to wear name badges so that the new hire can know who they're speaking to and can call them by name, and he can get to know their names a lot quicker, he or she. And you might consider designating a mentor for the new hire to shadow across their first few weeks. And this provides a go-to contact for all new teammates to resolve questions and problems. So knowing who you can go to ask questions makes that new hire more comfortable. And that's a part of the onboarding process, knowing who to go to, knowing who to get the answers from. That becomes an important part of your onboarding process. The easier that is for them to do, the easier the transition, the happier the employee, the more productive the employee. And you may go the extra step with the team and maybe have a team lunch to welcome the new employee and to meet a handful of other workers and staff. Social support is critical in a new employee's first few days, as revealed by the Society by SHRM. New orientation best practices. Welcoming messages. Prior to the first day, send the new hire a welcome message along with the orientation agenda. So, in other words, once you've hired this person, and once you're at a point where you can start communicating with them about the job, send them things, make them feel welcome, make them give them information so that when they go in the first day, they can be a little bit more familiar with, how things are run and what the expectations of the job are. These little welcome messages can go a long way to developing your employer brand, to letting the employee know that you really care, to let the employee know what the priorities and what the work expectations are. These little messages can say a lot. They can be very short, but they can mean tremendous amount. They can uh, they can end with a tremendous amount of productivity. They can it can end with an employee who acclimates more smoothly and transitions more smoothly through the onboarding process. Another thing that you can do is you can prepare a welcome packet that checks off several important first day functions. I know I've seen orientations and where people come in and they just talk and then they give them the paperwork to sign. And then I've seen orientations where when they come in, they have a packet that has the agenda and what's going to go on throughout the day. That's important to a new hire. It can be geared specifically to the employee's role. So, and it can contain relevant training documents. It can relay wider show the organizational structure as a whole, and online role responsibilities, accountability, and performance review procedures. And it can provide a sketch to the employee's typical workday. What is a typical workday? What does it include? Understanding those types of things and sharing that type of information with the new hire goes a long way into retention and onboarding. Set up the process for success. Few things are worse than arriving on your first day on the job only to have nothing prepared for you. And unfortunately, that has happened. You want to prep all necessary technology, tools, and equipment, PPEs, and name and or entry badges before the new hire arrives. Especially if that can be done, you're not always able to give them those badges before they arrive, because sometimes you have to go to, a specific department, like when you work in hospitals and things like that. But you want to have everything set up so that they know what's going to happen throughout the day. They know what to expect around 2 o'clock in the afternoon. They know what to expect in the morning. So, giving them that understanding makes them feel more comfortable and makes the transition into with the new employer a lot easier. And additionally, you can have a manager or a colleague or even the HR representative greet them at the door when they arrive. The welcome arrival sets a better tone and ensures that new employees are guided exactly where they need to be. And that is true. So if you can meet somebody at the door, or and sometimes they'll go to the reception area and then they'll sit in the reception area and they'll wait and wait and wait. That's not good, because that sends the message that they're not important. So on the day of orientation, someone should be there when they arrive. They should have a short wait time before somebody comes out and greets them and takes them to wherever it is they're going to be meeting at. If it's a group session, taking them into the wherever the group is going to be, and then as people come in, bring them in person by person so they can meet each other and maybe have a little conversation beforehand. But even so, sometimes orientations are with just one person, so giving them that undivided attention as soon as they get there, not making them wait 15 minutes, goes a long way to developing your employer brand and the onboarding process. Remote onboarding. There's going to be a lot of remote onboarding taking place, has taken place since the pandemic. In the remote age, onboarding employees is still a critical business function. So establishing culture and expectations, and coordinating delivery of technology and other tools, and delivering and completing paperwork can't be skipped. I know that I was working with an organization and they were outsourcing employees to another employer. And on the first day of employment, the onboarding process was remote, but nobody contacted that person. At 8 o'clock, when they were supposed to start work, no one contacted that person remotely. And then when they called, they didn't know who they were supposed to talk to. They got the runaround. And that employee ended up quitting within 2 weeks, because that onboarding process, it wasn't smooth. It didn't give them a welcoming feel. It didn't make them feel as if the employer cared. So, remote onboarding needs to be prompt. It needs to be timely. If you're asking someone to log on at a specific time, then you, as the representative of the company, should be on there waiting for those people to log on. They shouldn't log on and wait for you to log on. Onboarding has been especially difficult for companies that with who have antiquated processes. You need to modernize your processes for ease. Sometimes we have companies out there and they're doing it the same way they did it in 1955 because it worked for them. But onboarding should be something that's easy. And if those antiquated ways of doing things hinder the process or drag the process out, then that has an impact on the onboarding process and the longevity of the employee. And remote onboarding it's uncharted territory for many managers. They're not really sure how to handle it or manage it. And so working with your management team to make sure they understand how to do remote onboarding and what that entails, making sure the communication is really clear so people know where they're supposed to be, when they're supposed to be there, is a critical part of the onboarding process. You want to include your managers. Line managers to be present on the employee's first day. Few things convey lack of engagement, like a manager not being there on day one, or not knowing the employee's name or job title. So when new employees show up and they're not expected, nobody knows that they're coming, that can be a bad impression on that new hire. And it can make the onboarding process a little bit shaky, at least initially. So you want to avoid that. Make sure everybody knows that the new employee is starting so that they're prepared to receive them. And managers should look to make the first day memorable in some way. Make it a great day. No matter how small the position is, make the first day a great day for that new hire. And depending upon the size of your site, the mentors, your supervisors, your guides, and your trainers, they should be available to walk the new hire through the facility and explain the whole process and role that they'll be playing within it, so they understand what part they play in the team, and how, if they don't do their role, how it impacts the rest of the team. So they need to understand how, and that goes a long way in helping them to understand how valuable their work is and how it impacts the team. Create a plan. So one thing that you can do is have a plan. You can have a first day plan. You can have a plan for the first week for that new employee. So create a plan. The saying goes, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. So don't make the first day something that just happens. Have a plan in place on what that person is going to go through to ensure that they have a great first day, a great first week, and it ensures that they understand the expectations of the position. Standardize the process. Employees who receive poor on-the-job training leave within the first year of employment. It's imperative that you create a robust on-the-job training for every role in the family. Every role within your organization. You want to capture videos and photographs of your star performer. Some break rooms have employee of the month boards where they have the employees of the month for the first year. They have an employee recognition board where when somebody does something really good, and they're recognized, it's up on that board. You want to standardize the process on how people are treated from the day that they start, and then how people are treated within. You want to track the progress of learning, so they understand where they should be at week 1, where they should be at the end of week 2. You want to deliver the courses to your new hires. However, it just may be on the job training, but then it may be a course that somebody has to take, in a training class. So you want to deliver the courses to your new hires directly on the production floor, right where the job is going to be performed. That makes it really easy for them to understand the role that position plays. It's important for supervisors to have regular check-ins and observations of new employees to make sure they're comfortable, happy, and engaged. Supervisors should provide thoughtful feedback on their new hires' early contributions during onboarding. And this also strengthens the relationship between the employee and the organization that they work for. More engaged employees, higher productivity. And in closing, how you treat them is how you keep them. So that first day, how you treat them on that first day, that sets the tone for how you're going to be able to keep them. It sets the tone if it's going to be a short-term relationship or a long-term relationship. A smooth onboarding process ensures high productivity, high employee engagement. And if the process is not controlled, the onboarding process can be a nightmare, and it can result in reduced productivity and high turnover. So that concludes this webinar. Are there any questions?
All right. Thank you so much. That was great. So I think we have one more coming up in the next week, and I'll be sure to send that update out with the registration page. I don't see any questions coming through. So if you do have any questions, feel free to reach out to me and we'll get you an answer.
Thank you all for joining the webinar. I enjoyed sharing this information with you today.
Thank you. Thanks, Patrice. Have a great rest of your day.
You too.
Bye, everyone.